Y'all hear me okay? In the back, show me thumbs. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out for B-Sides Pittsburgh. Really appreciate you guys supporting the event and the greater effort of what B-Sides is around the world. For those of you who aren't familiar with the backstory on this stuff, it was all created years ago in Las Vegas following a situation where Chris Nickerson, Jack Daniels, a handful of folks, we all had a big party house out in Vegas, and some of our friends that had gotten denied the opportunity to speak came out and presented some pretty amazing content at this big party house we had out in Vegas, and that kind of became the birth of now what has grown into this amazing thing that we all go to. So again, thank you for coming out and supporting B-Sides, and thank you for coming to my speech. My name is Pyro, or Luke McOmie, depending upon how you know me. And today we're going to talk about a programmatic approach to enterprise security. The alt title on this one is How to Not Waste Your Security Budget on Shit That Doesn't Matter. I have worked in this industry exclusively in offensive security since 1994. I have founded and started or helped grow 5 different security practices during that time. And a lot of the work that I have done where originally, people would come watch me speak because they wanted to see us talking about breaking into banks or Federal Reserves or hospitals or all the other stuff we do. It has now kind of turned into me trying to take lessons learned from all of those different years of doing the work, and we're creating something new and different with the team and with the approach and the way that we're doing things with our customers. Had a TV show called Tiger Team back in the day with Chris Nickerson, Ryan Jones. A lot of people remember us from that kind of work. I'm part of the 303 security tribe and family. I'm a retired goon. I worked for DEF CON and ran contest events in villages for 23 years. And now I'm just happy that I get to go to DEF CON and sit there with a golden badge and sit on my ass at a bar and talk to everybody. So if you see me, please come up, say hi, let's visit, and we'll go on about stuff. In other words, I'm a big nerd. So in the next hour, one of the big things that we're going to talk about is the challenge that we see in a lot of different environments when people are trying to integrate or bring in things like offensive security into larger enterprise environments. And historically, as we'll talk about, a lot of this stuff has really been point-in-time type effort or work. It's the kind of thing that happens, not necessarily as often as it should. But we're going to kind of talk through why some of those old ways are not necessarily the best ways. The idea of this speech is really to kind of change your mindset and approach about how you guys think about this and really understand why we've potentially been focused on the wrong metrics. And we want to address the bigger challenge that I see with businesses right now, which is that budget is one of the biggest controlling factors. I was sitting with a C-level, I guess it's 2.5 months ago at this point, at a conference in Estes Park. And I was going on and on and on in my speech about how everything's got to be risk and impact focused, and that's the big thing that should make the decisions around how you're prioritizing and what you're doing with your spend. And he looked at me in the middle of the speech, heckled me, stood up and goes, "Bullshit. Budget's the deciding factor." In almost every single organization out there, you can have all the best plans, all the best ideas in the world, but budget's going to be one of the bigger limiting top-end type factors that's going to slow you down or stop you. So it made me start thinking about other types of things being time and individual capabilities within the organization that really do define those limits. And the big point of the talk is we're going to talk through better ways of being able to do this type of work and approach. So the challenge. Why is it so damn hard, right? We talk about this to all these different customers and all these different businesses, all kinds of different industries, and yet we hear the same challenges, the same problems, and the same issues throughout each individual thing. This is audience participation, and when I say audience participation, not like when she just asked if you were having a good time, I want all of you to answer these questions when we go through them. Are you ready? You're already failing. All right, are we ready? That's what I want to hear. All right. Why do you conduct assessments in your environments? Yell it out. You're required. Why are you required? Who requires it? Okay, audit, right? You're having to check a box, right? That's the bigger issue that we keep seeing. When my team and I talk to a customer and we hear them say the reason that we're doing this work is because we need to check a box, the actual thing that we're hearing from them is that they're really not getting any value out of the work. They're going after what's probably the legally minimum viable solution. They're not secure, and they're never going to be secure if that's the mentality of how they're going about this type of work. How often do you perform pen testing? Ooh, good answer, Rick. Smart ass. Once a year. We heard everybody yell quarterly. What we hear, that's the equivalent of essentially, I'm barely scratching at the surface. It's like I go to the gym once a year. This is you guys. How often do you change up your security provider? I heard 3 years. What else? Yell it out, folks. Never. Heard 1 year, 2 year. What else? What makes you make the big decision on why you change? Good answers all the way around. Usually what we hear from people is that they change either once a year or every other year. And the biggest reason that they do it, especially when we're talking to executives, is that they want a fresh set of eyes. They want to make sure that something's not being missed, something's not being overlooked. They want to actually validate and make sure that the partner that they've been working with is doing a good job. My problem with that is that when we hear that, what it really means is that every single year they're wiping the board clean, right? They're starting from scratch. They're having to go back through the process of procurement. They're having to find partners that they can trust. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on the phone trying to vet different companies to then take that business to. All of that money, time, and effort could be spent continuing to advance their overall security program or posture. With customers that say this to me, when we go in and we do the testing, especially if it's something where we've done the test, they bring in another provider, we come back a year later, we do the test again, guess what we see from a vulnerability standpoint? The exact same shit we've already seen 3 years ago, because they're not making forward effort in what they're doing. All right, audience, do you find yourself fighting fires, and are you focused on immediate need for your day-to-day efforts? Yes, no? Everybody's nodding their head yes. Remember, shout it out. I'm not the only one that's supposed to be speaking right now. Yes is good, smart ass. What we actually hear is that they're spending all of their budget. And when I say budget, I don't just mean money. I mean their resources, the time, any type of thing that you would see as some kind of a resource within the business. That stuff just gets blown fighting fires and dealing with symptoms instead of actually addressing the issues on why those problems actually exist within their environment in the first place. The problem with that is that they are literally just sitting on a ticking time bomb, waiting for things to go off the rails, waiting for things to fall apart. All right, what are you focused on this year? Okay, what insecurity? What are you doing this year and why? Come on, shout it out, folks. One of the things when I ask this question that I usually get from folks is that they'll tell me that they've got a compliance driver, the insurance companies told them that they now have to have MFA, they're trying to make things easier for the company, so they've gone to SSO, whatever it is. The problem that I hear in that is that they're putting all their eggs in one basket. Usually when you talk to larger environments especially that are going through these types of things, implementation of something like MFA, if you don't have a good partner or a good provider that's working with you that is doing this day after day, or single sign-on's even a little bit more dangerous around the time spent with this stuff, it can really, really drag on. One of the stories that I have with this is that I worked for one of the largest medical organizations in the world. Many users, many different remote locations around the planet. All kinds of research, education, clinical environments, and everything else. They decided that MFA was the big thing that they needed to get in place. They wanted multi-factor authentication on anything that was externally facing, and they were going to lock it down. They go through all the project planning, they identify all their different assets, they figure out all the other things that are exposed that are out there, they spend all this money, they bring in some of the biggest companies in the world to help them deploy and put this stuff in place. Top-notch software, cutting edge all the way across. As soon as MFA is deployed, hacker came in, did a push, and guess what the user did? Approve, exactly. So now you just watch them flush millions and millions and millions of dollars and over a year of project time to implement a solution that stopped nothing for them because the user did the wrong thing, right? Once again, focused on the wrong shit. The challenge that I really see with that stuff is that while they were doing all that other work, everything that we were trying to work on in these other divisions or other areas of the organization got put on the back burner. So all these other things that we would have been doing around user security awareness training, phishing, all these other things that would have actually maybe provided a little bit of knowledge or information to that user, specifically a doctor, who clicked that link, it may have been the difference between whether or not that had happened or not. The MFA installation of millions of dollars in months' time didn't stop it. But if that doctor, who is not a technical person as far as computers go, would have actually sat through a basic course, a know-before training, anything like that, it may have been the difference of where they would have thought for just a second before they clicked accept. How do you know you're secure, audience? I love speaking at technical conferences because you guys get it. The answer, what do you think I most often hear from executives? I shit you not, I hear this at least once a week. One of these, once a week from a customer. And these are good people, people that are working hard, people that are on top of this stuff, but this is what we hear. And the challenge that I have with that is that what they're actually saying to me is that they don't care. They don't feel like it's their responsibility. They're leaning on their insurance policy, which if you've ever, this is a fun one. How many of you have actually ever gone through an incident and had to leverage your insurance? Is it fun? Did it work? Did they actually pay for shit? Did they get you hooked up with good providers and get you back up quickly? Not usually. So again, the problem that I have with this, when somebody sits there and tells me that they're leaning on this stuff, or that they've never been hacked, or that they're not a target, it just really tells me that they don't get it. And at that point, as an advisor to them, it's my job to help educate and tie them back to why this stuff is important and why it matters and why they have to approach and think about this stuff differently. Right? That's essentially what they're doing. Big thumbs up, head in the sand. How many partners do you have? And when I mean this is, you probably have a partner that you buy your intrusion detection from, or your firewalls from. And you probably have a partner that you're leveraging for endpoint protection. And you probably have a partner that's helping you with infrastructure and just about everything else, right? When I visit with people, they usually sit there and tell us, I've got an MSSP, but we work with a different company that's got specialization in OffSec, so they come in and they hack us once a year. And we've got a whole other division that we work with that's responsible for governance, risk, and compliance, and they come in and they perform an audit 2 or 3 times a year maybe, depending upon which compliance set that they have to go after. Oh, and yeah, we buy all of our computers, and the people who do our infrastructure are, company D. Really what I hear is that at that point, you've got a lack of focus, communication, connection. You're constantly having to repeat work. You probably have audit and third-party assessor fatigue, meaning that what I mean by that is if you work at just about any industry, you probably have 2 or 3 different compliance requirements that you have to go through, and you end up spending all this time to generate all this paperwork, to generate all this data, to then hand that over to an auditor so they can come in and spend all this time to check boxes to then tell you, yep, you were compliant within this control or you were not compliant within that control. Guess what happens as soon as you're done with that audit? You go on to the next one. And then you're burning all your time, filling out paperwork. It's a rinse, wash, repeat process, and it's painful to watch, especially when you start looking at industries that have all kinds of different regulation, like anything in fintech, anything in the medical industry, anything in government operations. They have stacks of paperwork and different compliance requirements that they have to meet. And it ends up becoming literally a full-time job, which is why a lot of organizations now have dedicated GRC teams where that's their whole job all day long, is trying to sort this stuff out, answer questions, and put check boxes on a piece of paper. The issue that comes up with that is that they are always overtasked, overworked, buried in paperwork, and the work effort that they're putting out there really isn't actually advancing their security posture in any way. It's just documenting where they're at. Spooky. This is a fun one. How many of you do pen testing out there? Raise your hands. How often is your point of contact, your champion within the business, the person who's hiring you and working with you, bringing you in to do the pen test, how often are they the one that actually get to define the final scope of the test? It's rare. It's really rare. What we end up seeing all the time is that the legal teams usually get their foot in the door, or they'll stop things from happening because they're concerned about the potential impact or the potential of a system going down. You'll see compliance come in and say, oh, well, we can't have them doing pen testing in these various environments because we have to meet these specific audit and controls, and we can't let them into the CDE, for instance, right? There's credit card processing data in there. Or we'll talk to executives, and executives really get focused on whatever's on fire in front of them, whatever their teams have been telling them that whole time. The issue with that approach is that they don't have an understanding of what it is that you're actually supposed to be doing and getting out of that assessment or that test. There is an overall lack of technical depth. And I'm not picking on this stuff, right? I know a lot of executives out there that are top-notch folks at this stuff that do get it, but it's not the norm. And the issue that we really see is that in the end, they miss the whole purpose of why we're doing the testing, which then costs them the value of what would be the return from the reporting and the work effort that we've done. So they end up paying for a pen test with a limited scope during a limited amount of time on certain systems or certain areas within their business, and they try to use that sampling approach to try to justify what their overall security posture is of the business. And I'll tell you this, there's not a hacker out there in the world or a malicious actor that's going to give a shit about what your legal team thinks the scope should be, right? The people that are hacking you don't have to follow a piece of paper or a piece of work. So when I sit there and I hear this from teams, I try to sit there and coach again, where it's getting them to understand that if they're not holistically looking at their environment, then they're going to be missing things that are probably going to end up being mission critical and mission capable, depending upon how it gets targeted. I'm not here to pick on people or vendors, but the Equifax hack is a great example where, because they had such a large, super complex environment, and the way that they had all these internal teams broken out, batch of servers ended up not getting patched, and then every one of us that are in this room had our data leaked, right? It's a good example of how when you start siloing and you start making this stuff way more complex than it needs to be, it becomes very, very problematic. This is the last one. Do you have executive support? This is the one I always go in and ask the people who are actually boots on the ground, hands on keyboard, talking to us, right, the champions within the business that want us to come do the testing. Do you have executive support? And the most common thing that I end up hearing, I can't get leadership to understand the risk, the impact, the challenge, or the need. The sad thing is, when I hear that, what I'm really hearing is that you have no budget, there's no focus within your business that ties back the things that you need, the things that are critical for you to be able to be successful. And honestly, most of the time, the person that I'm talking to, they're the ones who are at fault because they're talking the wrong language. What I mean by that is that if I go in and I sit down with the CFO of a business, someone who's responsible for the finances, the money, the ins and the outs of the business, and I go, hey, we just did a pen test. We found out that we've got a whole bunch of broadcast protocols. There's a lack of SMB signing. These hackers were able to come in here, and under 10 minutes, they were able to compromise domain administrative credentials off the wire. They cracked those. They did pass the hash attacks, whatever they did with it, and it absolutely, just handed us our ass. Every password, every username within the domain was dumped. They were able to crack all these different things. CFO heard the entire time I'm talking that tech to him. But if I go into a C-level executive and I go, hey, here's a project plan. This is what it's going to take, the time that it's going to go. This is not an expensive thing. We're going to make changes through a group policy object, which again, understand you don't know that, but the point is it makes it to where all the different computers within the environment, we can essentially fix them very quickly and very rapidly. The result of that is going to be something that makes it to where we're spending less time, we have less risk, and the finances around this end up being way more positive because we're using less resources and wasting less people's time to try to chase this down. Now all of a sudden I'm speaking a language that the CFO is going to start associating with and understanding. He's going to hear less money, less time, better approach. Those are the types of things that will make him want to buy in and be committed to you. Same thing if I'm talking to a C-level executive that's responsible for operations or personnel. talk to them about the things that matter to them, and then all of a sudden, you'll get the support that you need. You can help them understand what's important by translating it into the language that they're going to be able to eat. So, once again, why is it so damn hard? Well, we're learning, and it's not hard, it's just new to us, right? One of the biggest things I tell people when you kind of take on this approach and you're trying to take a different path or a different direction, maybe you're working in an organization that's been using technology since the 80s or the early 90s, and there's still all kinds of old, antiquated systems. The way they defined and laid out their infrastructure and their network is still very much that old mentality around kind of the hub and thought process of let's put out this many systems in these many locations and plug them all together and see if they can talk. It's so far behind the times that you literally have to think about different ways to architect and engineer. So I always tell people, adopt a learning mindset. Be prepared to fail, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to struggle through these as you're trying to find the right solutions and the right way to get this stuff done. By adapting, adopting, you'll be able to achieve. If you see a company, or if you go to one of these speeches and you see something that could be beneficial to your environment, adopt it. Go figure out ways to implement it in your own network, because it can make a huge difference and a huge change. The biggest part that I say about this is find a good partner, right? Either hire brilliant people to come into your organization who are going to be your employees that can help drive this stuff, right? Surround yourself in smarter people. It's that old kind of adage. But at the same time, if you don't have the resources, or if you can't go hire yourself an employee that's probably going to cost you $250,000 a year at a minimum, then go out and find a partner that you can leverage and work with that's going to be able to bring those types of talents and capabilities to you, right? Because then you're paying them for the time and the effort versus having to pay somebody for their insurance, for their onboarding, for the laptop you're issuing, for all these other things. Take that money and put it elsewhere where it makes a difference. The biggest thing I tell people is practice, 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 right? It's the old, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? There you go. See, some people in the audience are still awake. It's good. The reason I've got the pictures on the side there, these are all examples of something in my life that when I first approached it seemed impossible, seemed magic, right? My uncle is one of these people where every single time you go sit at a bar with him, he pulls out some, parlor trick where it's this, well, if you can put a quarter in this bottle, then, I'll buy your liquor for the rest of the night kind of deal. And of course, there's some trick to it every single time. And once you know the trick, the whole thing seems kind of stupid, but it's something that you can then take to other people and go get your free drinks with, right? He used to teach me all these little tricks all the time. Lockpicking's another good example. How many of you have gone to the lockpicking village while you've been here? Oh, way more. You need to go try this. If the lockpicking village is busy, come to the Blue Bastion table. We've got a bunch of locks and handcuffs set up. Picks are there. You guys can come play with all that stuff at our table as well. But lockpicking was one of those that just seemed magical to me. When I was a kid, I watched this locksmith come over and pick a lock, and I just was blown away at how it was possible to open a door without a key. Just mind blown. Now that I know how a lock operates, it's the silliest shit in the world. Anyone can lockpick. Usually, I can sit down with somebody, and in 10 to 15 minutes of talking to them and demonstrating and showing them how a pin and tumbler lock work, they've picked the lock. It's not hard. It's just something you didn't necessarily know yet. The third from the top there, the chip. Who modded their Xbox back in the day? Excellent. How miserable was it to try to get each one of those little pieces of wire right on the right pin and get just the amount of solder so that it didn't bridge and completely destroy your Xbox? It was miserable. I ruined 3 or 4 Xboxes, and one of my friends walks over and goes, "Do you know what solder ribbon is? You ever seen a solder wick?" And I go, "Hell are you talking about?" He goes, "That's this little piece of copper. Here, put that on there." I put it on there. He runs this whole wad of solder over the top of the chipset and the pin set, and I'm screaming at him, I'm yelling at him, "You just destroyed another Xbox, man. These are not free." And he goes, No, check this out. Puts the foil on there, puts the heat on there, pulls it off, perfect solder every time. Again, looked like it was magic. I couldn't believe it when I watched it happen. But now that I do surface mount soldering, this is something I do every single day on every single one of the engagements I have, not because I necessarily need to, but because it looks good and it's easy and it's fun. Coding for me was definitely probably the big one. It was incredibly intimidating when I first wanted to learn how to do coding. I have attention deficit disorder. I'm dyslexic. That does not help when you're trying to learn a new language. And what people don't get about coding is it literally is learning a new language. But as soon as I started understanding structure and syntax and form and all of these other things that put the code together, then all the rest of it just kind of fell into place. Now it seems silly. If I want to go code something, it's more about deciding which new language I want to learn by using the project so that I can learn something new versus it being something that I'm afraid of or scared of. Same thing with this larger enterprise or programmatic type approaches. This stuff will seem, as we talk through it, really complex, but the truth of the matter is once you've done it once or twice, you'll kind of wonder why you haven't been doing it that way all along. And right when you think you're good at it, you can get smacked in the fucking head. Every time on any of this stuff. So again, be prepared to fail. Practice, practice, practice. Don't give up on this stuff. Now, I'm a child. I was born in 1977. Nintendo Entertainment System was like the coolest shit when I was growing up. There was nothing like it. It was remarkable, right? If I wanted to play games when I was little, I had to go down to the arcade or go down to a local, convenience store and pump quarters into something all day long. And then the fact Nintendo Entertainment System came out and I could have those same games at the house was just remarkable to me. My family was not a very wealthy family at all, so it was a really big deal when I got one for Christmas. And I remember throwing in Super Mario Bros. 1, the game you see up there at the top. And the first time I played it, I was so pissed off because it was so hard I threw my controller across the room, right? Just angry. Could not get it, couldn't figure it out. Played the game, played the game, played the game, played the game, played the game. Now, I can beat Super Mario Bros. 1 in under 10 minutes. I know where the warp zones are. I've memorized all the jumps. That's something where I don't know that I've actually dedicated any time to it since I was probably about 13 or 14 years old. And at 45 years old today, my brain still remembers every single bit of it. It's muscle memory at this point. It's never going to go away. It's kind of what I'm telling you about the way to approach this stuff and the way that you do security is stop falling back on stuff that's always been the way that you've done it. Try something new, and if it works, then master that. Mike Tyson was another great example. For those of you who don't remember the Mike Tyson games, again, ridiculously challenging. But the moment you figured out the timing, and you knew which way to lean, one way or the other, or you knew when to throw that uppercut or that jab, all of a sudden, the game seemed simple. You could chew through it in a single quarter. Bit of like bragging and self-promotion, but the bottom game there, how many people know that game? On the very bottom. Very good, sir. It's rare that folks remember Bubble Bobble. That game was stupid hard if you've never played it. Ah, thank you, sir. Ooh, that's tasty. What is that? Which bourbon? No, it tastes good. For Jim Beam, that's amazing. I got to get some of that bottle. But the beautiful thing about it is that, Bubble Bobble, my neighbor and I, we sat down and we wanted to beat the game. And if Nintendo Power back in the day, if you're the first person to beat a game and send in a picture of the end screen, they'd put you in the magazine. So I was super stoked when we got our parents to agree to let us have one TV in the house where they wouldn't shut it off. The crazy part about Bubble Bobble is that if you died, it'd give you this little 5-character code so you could jump back into the level, right? Not Nintendo Hard, you could go back to where you were. The problem with it is about half the time the codes that you'd put in wouldn't work, and it'd take you to some other random spot, flaw in the way the game was coded. So we sat there and we ground it out, level over level over level over level. Took us like 3 days to go through it, and then we were in Nintendo Power. Again, as a kid, nothing was cooler than being able to see all the people like go and buy this month's worth of Nintendo Power. There's me and my buddy sitting in front of the TV screen with it beat. It was so sweet. I feel the same way today as a 45-year-old man when we go into organizations and we help them kind of decipher their security challenges and approaches, where I can step back after we've beat the challenge and we can look at what we've accomplished and I can be proud of it because I know that it's made a positive impact within that environment. The key in any of this stuff, and the reason it's so damn hard, is that it's not just going to be an easy flip, and you're going to have to take time to practice it and work through it. So, here's where I piss everybody off. As I start this, let me state, I am not picking on any specific vendors or products. I love them all. They all have a place within our industry. There are purposes and uses for everything that I'm about to show you. But if you are relying on vulnerability counts, industry risk scoring, reputational damage threats, or even zero trust, you're probably doing it wrong. Yep, there's that look I get from people. So, let's go through it. Vulnerability counts. Again, love Tenable. We spend a bunch of money with them every year. Great product. I'm not picking on them for this. But if I go into an environment and an executive sits down and tells me that they are really focused on their vulnerability scores and counts, and they're trying to be proud about how things have shifted over time, and they're trying to use that to justify and show me that they're a stronger security posture, I really lose hope quickly. The reason being is that it's a limited view. The data that you're getting back is a lot of times not real, right? A lot of false positives, a lot of other issues. It doesn't know the difference between whether it's an internal or an external network. That's a pretty big difference in how a vulnerability is going to be rated, right? The exposure standpoint, likelihood of attack, these types of things. You're kind of missing the point. So the industry said, well, cool, vulnerability scoring or scanning isn't just the best way to do it, so let's create scorecards. And we're going to take all these other things within the business and we're going to put them together and we'll make it break down into primary colors and single syllables so all these executives that aren't technical can get it. And we'll give them A, B, C, D, E, F, G scores and we'll just make it great. Well, the problem that I have with this is that they roll up so high, so tall, that if you've ever dug into any of these products and you ask them how they developed the score or how the score was enumerated, they'll give you some fuzzy answers around, various weighted measurements and blah, 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 blah. But when you really get into it, you find out really quickly it's not real again. Show me a vulnerability scorecard out there that can assess your environment and understand what mitigating controls are in place, what type of accepted risks you have, and really, what are the types of things that are happening in the back end that are bad business practices that are introducing risk? There is not a scorecard out there or a product or a solution that is some AI-driven, machine learning, whatever, great tool of the environment that's out there that's actually going to give you a real view of what that environment is. This is one of my biggest issues with insurance companies right now, is we have all these insurance companies that have decided that they're going to offer cybersecurity policies and insurance, but you have to pass their scorecard first. So they've worked with some vendor out there, they scan your shit and they go, oh, look at all these SSL vulnerabilities you've got. You're bad, you're weak, we're gonna give you a policy, but it's gonna cost you all this extra money because you need to clean this stuff up. Truth is, they don't have a clue where you're at from a security or a responsibility perspective of how your environment's set up. It's just not a good value for your spend. And again, not picking on this stuff, all of it plays a part in a larger game, but if it's something that it's the only thing you're leaning into, you're doing it wrong. It's like trying to sit down on a stool that has one leg, and probably flipped upside down, if you know what I mean. So, this is the one that really pisses people off. I'm guilty of this. Let me start first off by saying, been doing this since 1994, sat in thousands of clients' environments, and I've sat there preaching about how if you get hacked, it's gonna be business destroying, and it could cost you millions of dollars, and all your clients are gonna leave you, and nobody will ever wanna work with you again. Well, there was a study done, 2001, and they went and looked at like 45 different companies, big and small, that had been companies that had gone through critical and major compromises, meaning over 1 million records had been lost. In every one of the situations that they looked at, not one of the businesses was out of business. You recognize all those logos on the bottom? Every one of those are companies that have had hundreds of millions of your records compromised, and yet you still spend money with them, you still run their software, you still shop there. The example I love to give people, Target had one of the largest data breaches of credit card data in the world at the time when it went down. How long was it before you went back into a Target and swiped a card? Yep, for most people, literally the next time they went to Target. Didn't even slow them down. So stop pushing and trying to get support from your executives by telling them that the world's gonna burn. Instead, focus on things that the spend is going to make positive, or the way that it's going to bridge a gap and make things better. And my favorite to pick on right now is zero trust. Again, At the base level, on paper, zero trust approaches are brilliant, right? Assume the bad guy's already there. Isolate everything away from itself. Implement multi-factor authentication. All the different layers and everything they're talking about are on point. But when they went out and queried tons and tons of different companies, 24%, almost a quarter of the people that they talked to who had tried to implement zero trust solutions into their environment said that it had been almost impossible to find a qualified vendor that was capable of doing all of the things to unify a solution that made it to where they were actually able to manage it, leverage it, and to where it made a difference within their environment. You can see all the other examples on there of different things that went down, but the real truth of the matter is that unless you are somebody who's got a budget like Microsoft or Google, IBM, you're probably not going to be able to afford to take that type of an approach towards technology or towards security. It's a little easier if you're building your environment from scratch with modern approaches, modern techniques, but how many of us are in a situation where we're starting like that? Not many. So, I've done a lot of bitching and whining so far. Now we're going to start talking about the other side of the coin. The better way to do this stuff is by going out and figuring smarter, more effective and efficient ways to leverage your time, your resources, your people, and your money. One of the big things that Corey spoke earlier about today, he's my coworker, he was up at 10 o'clock this morning, was about the need around automation within environments, right? He has this thing that we tell our employees, which is if it's something that you're going to end up doing more than twice, you probably just want to write a script for it and automate it, right? There's no reason to sit there and grind the same day and not have any forward movement. The other thing that you should do is bring your team, your tools, and your talents together, and if you unify them and you kind of hone and sharpen them and use them in the right ways, you can be far more effective. I talk about shared knowledge, and what I mean by that is that the traditional approach, really popular late 90s, early 2000s, that I still see carried on well into today, is this siloed approach where people think, well, it's important for me to segment my network, so I also probably should segment my business, right? Need to know, least access, these types of things. We hear it all the time. The issue that I have with a lot of that is that you can spend all the money in the world trying to take care of everything that your IT department wants you to do, but if I can walk up to your building and throw a brick through a window, walk into your data center and walk out with a server, you're screwed. So where's your business support people? Where's your management, your property management people? Better yet, when I tell companies to build out and put together steering or advisory committees about this, one of the key people that we usually bring in are janitorial services. The people who are actually on the site, working with the business. They're the ones who have the keys to the doors. They're the ones who know all the different things that work or don't work within that business. Yet, how many times when you've watched somebody go out and create a steering committee around security, how many times have you ever actually seen them involve someone that's responsible for like maintenance or security of the physical aspect of the business? It's almost always overlooked. Report once, or measure once, report many. We talked about earlier about GRC, right, and the audit fatigue that people get into. The cool part is if you take a unified or programmatic approach with the work that you're doing, you will already be addressing all of the different compliance controls that are necessary for your specific business by exceeding them, just by applying simple best practices. The idea here is to not get lost in this having to chase to check a box. I hate when people come to me and say that they've got to buy a product or spend all this money simply to address some box that needs checked out there. It's not the right answer or the right reason to be doing the work. You need to implement those controls and those solutions because they're positively impacting your security posture, not because it's something where someone tells you you have to do it in order to be legally viable. The other thing I tell people is to focus on risk and budget versus vulnerability accounts. We covered that a little bit earlier, but the real focus around that is, again, make sure that the budget that you're spending is addressing the things that are introducing the largest risk into your environment. That's not chasing some requirement that's been pushed down upon you by an insurance company or by a third-party partner that's mad that you haven't gotten an attestation letter for one of the environments that they're working in. Maybe that's not the most important thing to your business right now. So the idea is to really start figuring out ways to do prioritization that make a difference. This is another one, collaborative approach versus zero knowledge. What I mean by this is that if you're a pen tester, you're probably used, especially point-in-time pen testing, you're probably used to clients coming to you saying that they don't want to tell you anything about their environment. You know, yeah, we'll give you network ranges, but that's about it. We want to know what it'd be like if you were a bad guy coming from the internet and all the different things you're going to target and all the different things you're going to hack. The problem is that if you look at the real world and all the incidents that we see and all the different things that we go through right now, that has absolutely nothing to do with what makes something protected or secure. Instead, leverage the knowledge of the people who already work there. Talk to them and understand what's critical, what's important, what are the things that are top of mind, right? What are they most worried about and the things that are most important to their business. Then when you're doing your testing, you can prioritize looking at these different environments in these different areas with that knowledge of someone who's potentially been within the organization of 20 years. Skipping you way ahead, making it to where you're not wasting time just doing simple discovery and trying to understand what the environment is. The bigger part here is really, all of this can lead to quicker decisions and actions, not just for compliance, but for your overall security program. We tell people to take the compliance approach because it makes all the difference in the world to where if you do it right the first time, you're probably not going to have to do it over and over again or waste money. So, I am short on time apparently, so I'm going to go quick through this. The programmatic approach, when we talk to customers, we break down a couple different areas of the business. This is not going to be complete, but it's going to give you an idea of how we do this. Maybe if I don't break my computer. When I go in and I talk to a company, I want to understand their mission, their vision, their culture, their budget, the focus, who their customers are, how they're generating money. I want to talk to their leadership, I want to talk to their governance, risk, and compliance, and I want to understand their disaster recovery, their business continuity, how are they going to be able to continue to operate if they get compromised. The example I'll give you off of this page is that, you know, if I'm going in and I'm writing a security program and I'm trying to help a business that is in a skiff out in Reston, Virginia, that works, somebody within the government, their approach is going to be very, very different than someone who's manufacturing surfboards out in California. So why the hell would I take an industry-wide accepted approach for both businesses? It doesn't make any sense. With technology, we talk through the things that you see up there on the page as well, really trying to identify gaps, understand the different types of things that they have in place, where they're strong and where they're weak. In security, we go through and we do interviews to understand the overall maturity. What controls do they have in place? What solutions do they have available to them? Have they bought a whole bunch of products that are just shelfware, sitting there with a flashy, blinky light, not doing anything that nobody ever logs into, but you're spending $50,000 a year to have this box sitting there? Or are they actually leveraging the tools to do something and make something different within their environment? And finally, one of the more important ones that I don't hear enough people talk about is talking through who your enemy is, right? If I'm going to get in a ring and I'm going to box somebody, I'm going to watch thousands of videos of every single time that opponent has been filmed fighting so that I can understand. Maybe they drop their left a little when they lean in to take that punch. That gives me an opportunity to be able to come up and pop them in the chin. It's the same thing here. Understand, have they been hacked before? Are they prepped? Have they done things like incident response and tabletop testing? Have they gone through an actual incident and been compromised? Were they able to recover, right? Or did it take them down? How long did it take them to go up? We do a lot of this work to really then help us form an approach that develops a risk model that really looks at the bigger picture, bubbles up priorities, and the key is to help them have big wins quick, right? Not getting lost in something because of a specific risk score, but doing something because it's going to be the thing that makes the biggest positive change within their environment. Big part about program execution to make sure that this is successful is you have to do this with the executives. The people who are responsible for being able to sign a check. They're going to define the budget, the timelines, they're going to get you the support that you need. You need to have good project management and good approaches. The key is to make sure that you stay out of the weeds and try to get it right. Again, you probably aren't going to get it right on the first time. So live, learn, and adapt. Make it better as you go. Really, in the end, the big thing that we push towards is unifying, prioritizing, and executing so that you're successful. I've been picking on GRC a bunch, but the truth is that they're absolutely critical, legally required, and it's important. So if you've got to have it, then figure out ways that you can go through and look at the different control sets that are defined in the requirements of whatever compliance standard you're having to follow, and then understand, do those controls apply to my business, right? If I'm not a credit card processor, then why am I spending thousands and thousands of dollars a year to try to segment a CDE out? Doesn't make sense. Why am I doing PCI? It's just silly. And all the time we talk to different people and really try to help them understand what are the types of things that you can do through policy and procedure that will then enable or add support to the effort of what you're trying to create and do. The biggest thing to remember to ask yourself when you're going through the different compliance requirements is, why does it matter and why does it apply to me? Never, ever let that answer be because I need to check the box. Ooh, my slides are going crazy. Here we go. Maybe. There we go. So playing together, again, bring everybody together, unify, make sure that everybody's able to speak together, make sure that those walls are knocked down. Don't get people lost in having to go up through different chains of commands in order to get an answer. The whole idea behind putting together a steering committee for security is to be able to define and understand the things that are most important within your business, and really what are the things that are going to make that biggest positive change for you. And last, the key points that I'd really want to talk about today is that when you move away from one-off engagements and you start moving to a programmatic relationship or approach, the bigger thing that you're going to start focusing on are what are those big changes, not what dumpster fire do I have to put out today. Again, better spends of time, money, and effort. When you go through and you've got to, quote unquote, eat that elephant, figure out what bites are going to be the bites that make it to where you're going to have the biggest positive change. And again, do what's right for you, not just adopting some industry standard or some score system or whatever framework's been thrown in front of you today that looks good. Figure out which one's going to be right for you and focus on that big picture, then drill down. It's really easy when you're talking about something as complex as a large enterprise environment to get lost in the weeds. The bigger thing that you need to do is make sure that the decisions and the actions that you're doing have a play across the entire environment, not just rabbit holing into the one thing that looks like it's on fire today. So I'm a little over on time. Sorry, I rushed that a bit. But tonight, this is the part you've all been waiting for. After the happy hour that they're doing here, around 7:30, we're going to be over at Burn. Please come join us. It's a cigar and whiskey bar. We're going to open up about 7:30. The password to get in on my tab is going to be I know Pyro. So be sure to say that. Other projects that I've got, if you want to come chat with me about and talk through, I'm into mycology. I live off-grid in a bunker on the side of a mountain in Colorado, 100% self-reliant, self-dependent. I was one of the first and early adopters of Starlink. I do gold mining, have a 1,000-foot deep mine that goes into the side of a mountain, really into ham radio and digital communications. And even though my wife's probably going to kill me for it, I ended up spending an insane amount of money to upgrade my solar system lately with commercial-level Schneider gear so I can hack that for work and write it off as a tax write-off for business research and purposes versus putting some bullshit into my house. Please, come hang out tonight. Follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the other stuff. I'm out there. I'm pretty public. I will be at Hacker Summer Camp, so if you're coming out to Vegas, please hit us up. It's an insane amount of fun out there, and I'd love to visit with you about the projects, the things you're passionate about, and the things that really make you tick as well. So, questions? I am a little over time, but I'd love to take some if you got some. Excellent. That made it easy. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time and your effort today. Please come hit me up if you've got some of this that you'd like to talk about or share some war stories of stuff that's relevant to the speech. And enjoy the rest of B-Sides.